In the glittering halls of Astoria Palace, where whispered secrets hold more power than crowns, and ancient bloodlines clash with modern ambitions, one guard's conscience will shake the very foundations of a 1,000-year monarchy. When Captain Marcus Rothwell discovers a conspiracy that could destroy the beloved Crown Princess Elena and elevate the ruthless Duchess Viviana to unprecedented power, he faces an impossible choice: protect his oath of silence or risk everything to expose a truth that could save the kingdom from its darkest hour. What happens when loyalty to the crown conflicts with loyalty to justice? The answer lies in a secret so explosive that it will either forge a new era of truth or burn the monarchy to ashes. The autumn rain drummed against the towering windows of Astoria Palace as Captain Marcus Rothwell completed his evening rounds through the marble corridors. 23 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him to notice every shadow, every whispered conversation, every subtle shift in the palace's delicate political atmosphere. Tonight, something felt different. Marcus paused outside the ornate oak doors of the Queen's private study, where an unusual gathering was taking place well past midnight. Through the slight gap in the heavy curtains, he could see 3 figures huddled around the mahogany desk that had witnessed centuries of royal decisions. Queen Isabella sat rigid in her chair, her silver hair gleaming under the lamplight, while Duchess Viviana paced behind her like a caged predator. The third figure, Lord Chancellor Blackwood, shuffled through documents with the practiced efficiency of a man accustomed to orchestrating palace intrigue. The conversation drifted through the door in fragments, but what Marcus heard made his blood run cold. They were discussing Crown Princess Elena, the beloved heir to the throne who had captured the hearts of the kingdom with her charitable works and genuine compassion for the common people. More specifically, they were discussing how to destroy her. Duchess Viviana's voice cut through the air like a blade. She had married into the royal family 5 years ago when she wed Prince Alexander, the Queen's younger son. But her ambitions had always reached far beyond her position as a duchess. Marcus had observed her carefully over the years, noting how she maneuvered through palace politics with the skill of a master chess player, always positioning herself closer to power. "The photographs will be devastating," Viviana was saying, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "The public will never accept a crown princess who appears to be involved in such scandal. Once these images surface in tomorrow's papers, Elena's reputation will be in ruins." Queen Isabella shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Despite her stern exterior, Marcus knew she harbored genuine affection for her daughter-in-law, Elena, who had married Crown Prince David 3 years earlier. The marriage had been celebrated throughout the kingdom, uniting 2 ancient noble houses and promising a bright future for the monarchy. "Are you certain these photographs cannot be traced back to us?" the Queen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lord Chancellor Blackwood adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles and nodded gravely. "The photographer has been well compensated for his silence. The images were taken at what appears to be a private meeting between Princess Elena and Lord Garrett Ashford, the ambassador from the neighboring kingdom of Valdres. Without context, they appear highly compromising." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He knew Lord Ashford well, having served as his security detail during several diplomatic visits. The man was beyond reproach, a devoted family man whose diplomatic missions had prevented several border conflicts. If Elena had met with him privately, it could only have been for legitimate political reasons. "The beauty of it," Viviana continued, her eyes gleaming with malicious triumph, "is that Elena will have no way to defend herself without revealing state secrets. The meeting was about the Valdres trade agreements, which are classified at the highest level. She cannot explain why she was there without violating her oath of secrecy to the crown." The weight of what Marcus was witnessing began to settle upon him like a heavy cloak. This was not merely palace gossip or political maneuvering. This was a calculated attack on an innocent woman, designed to clear Viviana's path to greater power. If Elena fell from grace, Prince Alexander and his wife Viviana would move up significantly in the line of succession. Queen Isabella stood slowly, her arthritis evident in her careful movements. At 73, she had ruled Astoria for nearly 4 decades, navigating world wars, economic crises, and family scandals with remarkable resilience. But Marcus could see the toll this decision was taking on her. "Very well," she said finally. but I want it understood that this action is taken for the good of the realm. Princess Elena's growing influence with the common people has made her increasingly difficult to control. Her insistence on transparency in royal finances and her support for democratic reforms threaten the very foundation of our monarchy. Marcus realized he was witnessing more than a personal attack. This was about preserving an old order against the winds of change that Elena represented. The princess had indeed become a champion for modernizing the monarchy, advocating for greater accountability and closer connections with the people they served. Duchess Viviana moved to pour herself a glass of wine from the crystal decanter on the side table. By next week, the scandal will have consumed all public discourse. Elena will be forced to withdraw from public life, and Prince David will have no choice but to distance himself from her to preserve his own standing. The path will be clear for a more traditional approach to royal duties. The casual cruelty in her voice made Marcus's hands ball into fists. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family. But what happened when members of that family threatened each other? His mind raced as he considered his options. As Lord Chancellor Blackwood began gathering the incriminating photographs, Marcus caught a glimpse of the images. They showed Princess Elena and Lord Ashford in what appeared to be an intimate conversation in a secluded garden pavilion. The photographer had captured moments that, without context, could indeed be misinterpreted as romantic rather than diplomatic. The newspaper editor has been convinced that publishing these photographs serves the public interest, Blackwood continued. He believes he is exposing potential adultery by the future queen. He has no idea he is being manipulated. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. An innocent newspaper editor was about to destroy his own credibility while unknowingly participating in a royal coup. The ripple effects would extend far beyond the palace walls. The meeting began to conclude as the conspirators finalized their timeline. The photographs would appear in the morning edition of the Kingdom Herald, Astoria's most widely read newspaper. By evening, every household in the realm would be discussing Princess Elena's supposed infidelity. As the three figures prepared to leave, Marcus quickly retreated to an alcove, his mind churning with the magnitude of what he had discovered. His 23 years of service had been built on the principle of unwavering loyalty to the crown, but now he faced an impossible choice: remain silent and watch an innocent woman be destroyed, or speak out and risk not only his career, but potentially his life. The corridors fell silent as the conspirators departed, leaving Marcus alone with his terrible knowledge. Through the tall windows, he could see the first pale hints of dawn on the horizon. In just a few hours, the kingdom would wake to a scandal that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Marcus made his way to his small apartment in the palace's staff quarters, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. The weight of decision pressed down upon him as he considered the consequences of action versus inaction. Princess Elena deserved to know what was coming, but warning her would mean betraying his oath to the queen. As he reached his door, Marcus paused to look back down the corridor toward the royal apartments where Princess Elena slept peacefully, unaware that her life was about to be turned upside down. In his pocket, he carried the keys to every door in the palace, symbols of the trust placed in him by the crown. Now he had to decide whether that trust belonged to the institution of the monarchy or to the innocent individuals caught within its web of intrigue. The guard who had spent over 2 decades protecting royal secrets was about to become the keeper of the most dangerous secret of all. Dawn broke over Astoria Palace with deceptive serenity, painting the ancient stone walls in shades of gold and amber. Captain Marcus Rothwell stood at his bedroom window, watching the morning mist rise from the palace gardens, where he had seen Princess Elena walking just yesterday, her laughter carrying on the autumn breeze as she played with her young nephew. That image now felt like a memory from another lifetime. The grandfather clock in the corridor chimed 6 times as Marcus made his decision. He could not stand by and watch an innocent woman be destroyed by lies. His oath was to protect the royal family, and that included protecting them from each other when necessary. Moving with the practiced stealth that had made him one of the palace's most trusted guards, Marcus made his way through the servants' corridors toward the crown princess's apartments. The early morning shift change provided him with the perfect cover, as guards focused on their handovers rather than questioning his presence in areas outside his normal patrol route. Princess Elena's private secretary, Margaret Thornfield, was already at her desk in the antechamber, Sorting through the morning's correspondence, a woman in her 50s who had served the royal household for nearly 3 decades, Margaret possessed the rare combination of absolute discretion and genuine loyalty to those she served. "Captain Rothwell," she said, looking up with surprise. "You're rather early for the security briefing." Marcus glanced around to ensure they were alone before closing the door behind him. "Mrs. Thornfield, I need to speak with Princess Elena immediately. It's a matter of urgent security." Something in his tone must have conveyed the gravity of the situation because Margaret set aside her papers without question. "She's in her private study, reviewing the morning briefings. I'll announce you." "No," Marcus said quickly. "This must be completely unofficial. Please, just tell her that Captain Rothwell has information that requires her immediate attention." Margaret studied his face for a moment, reading the tension there with the insight of someone who had spent decades navigating palace intrigue. She nodded once and disappeared through the heavy wooden door leading to Elena's private chambers. Within minutes, Princess Elena appeared, wearing a simple blue dress that reflected her preference for understated elegance over royal ostentation. At 29, she possessed a natural grace that made her equally comfortable in formal state dinners and community centers in the kingdom's poorest neighborhoods. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her green eyes held the intelligence that had made her such an effective advocate for social reform. "Captain Rothwell," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "Margaret says you have urgent security concerns. Please, sit down and tell me what's troubling you." Marcus remained standing, his military training making it difficult to sit in the presence of royalty, especially under these circumstances. "Your Highness, what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to believe, but I swear on my oath as a royal guard that every word is true." Elena gestured for him to continue, her expression growing more serious as she recognized the gravity in his voice. "Last night, I inadvertently overheard a conversation between Queen Isabella, Duchess Viviana, and Lord Chancellor Blackwood. They have orchestrated a plan to destroy your reputation using fabricated evidence of improper conduct." The color drained from Elena's face, but she maintained her composure with the strength that had made her beloved among both nobility and commoners. "What kind of evidence?" Marcus explained what he had witnessed, detailing the photographs and the plan to use her legitimate diplomatic meeting with Lord Ashford as the foundation for scandal. As he spoke, he watched Elena's expression shift from shock to anger to a steely determination that reminded him why she had become such a formidable force for change within the monarchy. "They're using my own integrity against me," Elena said quietly. "They know I cannot reveal the true nature of my meeting with Lord Ashford without violating state security protocols." "Yes, Your Highness. The meeting concerned the Valdres trade negotiations, did it not?" Elena nodded grimly. "Lord Ashford brought intelligence about economic instability in the northern provinces that could affect our grain imports. We met privately because the information was too sensitive for normal diplomatic channels. If that intelligence were to become public, it could destabilize markets across 3 kingdoms." Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized the full cleverness of the trap. This is Elena was caught between personal ruin and national security, with no apparent way to prove her innocence without potentially causing international incidents. "There's more, Your Highness," Marcus continued. "I believe this is not merely about destroying your reputation, but about clearing Duchess Viviana's path to greater power. If you are disgraced, Prince Alexander and his wife move significantly higher in the succession." Elena stood and moved to the window overlooking the palace courtyard, where early morning staff were beginning their daily routines. Guards changed shifts, gardeners tended to the autumn flowers, and kitchen staff hurried between buildings with supplies for the day's meals. All of them depended on the stability of the monarchy for their livelihoods. 20,000 people work in and around this palace," Elena said softly. "Hundreds of thousands more depend on the tourist revenue from royal events and ceremonies. If this scandal destroys confidence in the monarchy, the economic impact could be devastating." Marcus had not considered the broader implications, but Elena was right. A major royal scandal would affect far more than just the individuals involved. The kingdom's carefully maintained image of stability and tradition brought in billions in tourism revenue annually. "What are you going to do, Your Highness?" Elena turned back to face him, and Marcus was struck by the transformation in her demeanor. Gone was the gentle princess known for her charity work and public appearances. In her place stood a woman prepared for battle. "I'm going to fight back," she said firmly, "but I'll need help, and I'll need people I can trust absolutely. Captain Rothwell, you've already risked your career by warning me. Are you prepared to risk more?" Marcus straightened into a military attention stance. "I am at your service, Your Highness." "Good. First, I need you to find out exactly when and where those photographs were taken. If we can establish a timeline, we might be able to prove that the meeting was legitimate without revealing classified information. I can access the palace security logs and cross-reference them with Lord Ashford's official schedule," Marcus replied. "Excellent. Second, I need to know who else might be involved in this conspiracy. Duchess Viviana didn't orchestrate this alone, and I doubt Queen Isabella conceived of it independently. Someone with significant resources and political connections is pulling the strings." Elena moved to her desk and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the kind she used for her most sensitive planning. "Third, we need allies. People within the palace and beyond who can help us when this story breaks." Marcus watched as she began making notes, her handwriting quick and decisive. Despite the dire circumstances, he felt a surge of hope. Princess Elena was not going to be a passive victim in this conspiracy. "Your Highness, may I suggest that we also consider Lord Ashford's position? If these photographs surface, his reputation will be destroyed alongside yours. His diplomatic career could be ended, and the relationship between Astoria and Valdris could suffer." Elena paused in her writing and looked up with approval. "You're absolutely right. Lord Ashford deserves to know what's coming, and we may need his cooperation to establish the truth. Do you know his current location?" "He returned to Valdris 2 days ago, but he's scheduled to return for the Autumn Trade Summit next week." "Too late," Elena said grimly. "According to what you overheard, the photographs will be published this morning. By next week, the damage will be irreversible." As if summoned by her words, Margaret Thornfield knocked softly on the door. "Your Highness, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have an urgent call from the Prime Minister's office." Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. News traveled fast in political circles, and if the Prime Minister was already calling, it could only mean one thing. "Put the call through," Elena instructed. As Margaret withdrew to transfer the call, Elena turned back to Marcus. "Captain, I want you to begin your investigation immediately. Find out everything you can about how those photographs were obtained and who else knew about my meeting with Lord Ashford. But be careful. If they discover that you're investigating, you could become their next target." The telephone rang, and Elena picked up the receiver with steady hands. "Prime Minister Davidson, good morning." Marcus could not hear the other side of the conversation, but Elena's expression told him everything he needed to know. The storm had begun. "I see," Elena said calmly. "Yes, I understand your concern. No, I will not be issuing any statements until I've had time to review the situation fully. Thank you for the courtesy of calling me directly." She replaced the receiver and turned back to Marcus. "The photographs are already in circulation. 3 major newspapers are preparing to run the story in their afternoon editions. We have perhaps 6 hours before this becomes a national crisis." Marcus felt the weight of the timeline pressing down on them. 6 hours to unravel a conspiracy that had likely been months in the planning. "Your Highness, what about Prince David? Shouldn't we inform him immediately?" Elena's expression softened slightly at the mention of her husband. "David is in the northern provinces, touring the agricultural districts affected by the early frost. He won't return until tomorrow evening. I won't destroy his important work with a phone call that could accomplish nothing except causing him worry." Marcus admired her consideration for her husband's duties, but he also recognized the political calculation. If Prince David rushed back to the palace immediately, it would signal panic and lend credence to the scandal. "Then we proceed with our investigation," Elena said, her voice regaining its determined edge. "Captain, you have your assignments. I'll begin working on damage control and identifying our potential allies. We'll reconvene in 3 hours to assess what we've learned." As Marcus prepared to leave, Elena called him back. "Captain, I want you to know that whatever happens, I will never forget that you chose truth over silence. That kind of courage is exactly what this monarchy needs to survive." With those words echoing in his mind, Marcus left the Crown Princess's apartments to begin the most important investigation of his career. In the corridors of Astoria Palace, where secrets were currency and loyalty was often bought and sold, one guard was about to discover just how deep the conspiracy against Princess Elena truly ran. Captain Marcus Rothwell moved through the palace with purposeful efficiency, his mind cataloging every detail that might prove crucial to exposing the conspiracy. His first stop was the Central Security Office, where comprehensive logs of all palace activities were meticulously maintained. 23 years of service had earned him unlimited access to these records, a privilege that now became his most valuable weapon. The security office occupied a windowless room in the palace's lower level, filled with banks of monitors displaying feeds from hundreds of cameras positioned throughout the grounds. Sergeant Coleman, the duty officer, looked up from his coffee and stack of incident reports as Marcus entered. "Morning, Captain. Early start today?" "Just following up on some routine matters," Marcus replied, settling at one of the computer terminals. "I need to review some entry logs from the past month." Marcus began his search with the date of Princess Elena's meeting with Lord Ashford, working backward to establish a pattern. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The meeting had taken place in the Garden Pavilion, a structure originally built for intimate royal gatherings, but now primarily used for private diplomatic discussions. According to the logs, only 4 people had official access to that area during the relevant time period: Princess Elena, Lord Ashford, and 2 security personnel assigned to diplomatic protection. But the photographic angles he had glimpsed the night before suggested the photographer had positioned himself in the old oak grove overlooking the pavilion. That area was off-limits to all except senior gardening staff and security personnel. Marcus cross-referenced the maintenance schedules with the timeline and found something disturbing. On the day of the meeting, Jeremy Hartwell, a recently hired groundskeeper, had been scheduled to work in the oak grove. His employee file showed he had been hired just 6 weeks earlier, with references from a private landscaping company that Marcus had never heard of despite his familiarity with all palace contractors. "Coleman," Marcus said casually, "do you remember anything unusual about the security briefings from 3 weeks ago? Any new protocols or special assignments?" Sergeant Coleman scratched his graying beard thoughtfully. "Now that you mention it, there was something odd. Lord Chancellor Blackwood requested additional privacy measures for certain diplomatic meetings, said there had been concerns about information leaks to foreign intelligence services." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "What kind of privacy measures?" "Standard counter-surveillance protocols. We were instructed to maintain greater distances from diplomatic personnel during private meetings to avoid any appearance of eavesdropping. Made our job more difficult, actually, but orders are orders." The brilliant cruelty of the plan became clear to Marcus. By implementing enhanced privacy protocols, the conspirators had ensured that Princess Elena and Lord Ashford would be isolated during their meeting, making it impossible for palace security to serve as witnesses to the legitimate nature of their discussion. Marcus made a note of Jeremy Hartwell's employee information and moved to his next objective, tracking the chain of command that had led to these new protocols. Lord Chancellor Blackwood had the authority to implement security changes, but such decisions typically required approval from either Queen Isabella or the captain of the Royal Guard. His investigation was interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Through the security office door, Marcus could hear raised voices and hurried footsteps. Sergeant Coleman activated the corridor cameras, and they both watched as several palace staff rushed past, their faces tense with excitement or concern. "Something's happening," Coleman muttered, reaching for his radio. Before he could make contact, the office door burst open, and Deputy Captain Harrison appeared, his uniform slightly disheveled as if he had dressed hurriedly. "Marcus, thank God you're here," Harrison said breathlessly. "All senior staff are being called to an emergency meeting in the Queen's conference room. The Lord Chancellor says it's a matter of national security." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The emergency meeting could only mean one thing. The scandal was breaking earlier than anticipated, and the palace was moving into crisis management mode. "What's the nature of the emergency?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I don't have details, but there's talk of a serious breach involving Princess Elena. The Queen is reportedly furious, and Duchess Viviana has been called back from her charity event in the capital." Marcus exchanged glances with Sergeant Coleman, who was listening with obvious concern. Palace emergencies affected everyone, from the highest nobles to the newest staff members. "I'll be right there," Marcus told Harrison. "Coleman, maintain standard protocols and keep me informed of any unusual activities." As he walked toward the Queen's conference room, Marcus's mind raced through the implications. If the palace was already in crisis mode, it meant the photographs had been released ahead of schedule, or someone had leaked information about the planned scandal. Either possibility represented a dangerous escalation. The corridors leading to the royal conference room buzzed with activity. Staff members huddled in small groups, whispering among themselves while senior officials moved with grim purpose. Marcus recognized the signs of a palace in turmoil, the kind of chaos that erupted during major scandals or political crises. Outside the conference room, Marcus encountered Mrs. Margaret Thornfield, Princess Elena's private secretary, who was speaking quietly with the Queen's personal assistant. Both women looked pale and shaken. "Mrs. Thornfield," Marcus said quietly, "how is Princess Elena?" Margaret glanced around nervously before responding. "She's requested privacy to review the situation and prepare her response. The Prince David has been contacted and is returning immediately from his northern tour." The fact that Prince David was cutting short his important agricultural tour confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The situation had already spiraled beyond their control. Lord Chancellor Blackwood appeared at the conference room door, his usual composed demeanor replaced by an expression of grave concern that Marcus suspected was entirely fabricated. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Her Majesty will address the current crisis shortly." Marcus filed into the conference room with approximately 20 other senior staff members, including department heads, security chiefs, and key advisors. The room itself was a monument to royal tradition, with portraits of past monarchs gazing down from oil paintings that had witnessed centuries of state decisions. Queen Isabella entered with the measured dignity that had characterized her long reign, but Marcus could see the tension in her posture. She was accompanied by Duchess Viviana, whose expression of shocked concern was so perfectly crafted that Marcus had to admire her acting ability even as he despised her deception. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Queen began, her voice carrying the authority of 4 decades on the throne, "we face a crisis that threatens the very reputation of our monarchy. This morning, several newspapers have published compromising photographs purporting to show Princess Elena in an inappropriate relationship with a foreign diplomat." A murmur of shock and dismay rippled through the assembled staff. Marcus watched carefully as various officials reacted, noting who seemed genuinely surprised and who appeared to have prior knowledge of the situation. "These allegations are extremely serious," the Queen continued, "not only because they call into question Princess Elena's personal conduct, but because they potentially compromise our diplomatic relationships and national security." Duchess Viviana stepped forward slightly, positioning herself as the Queen's chief supporter in this crisis. "Her Majesty has asked me to coordinate the palace's response to ensure that our kingdom's interests are protected during this difficult time." Marcus felt a surge of anger at Viviana's calculated positioning. She was using the crisis she had created to elevate her own status within the royal hierarchy, presenting herself as the steady hand needed to guide the monarchy through turbulence. All staff members are directed to refer any media inquiries to the official palace press office, Lord Chancellor Blackwood added. "Under no circumstances should anyone discuss this matter with outside parties without explicit authorization." The meeting continued with discussions of enhanced security measures and media management protocols, but Marcus barely heard the details. His mind was focused on the timeline and the opportunities for action that remained. As the meeting concluded and staff began to file out, Marcus lingered until only he and a few other senior security personnel remained. Queen Isabella was speaking quietly with Lord Chancellor Blackwood and Duchess Viviana, their heads close together as they planned their next moves. Marcus caught a fragment of their conversation that made his blood boil. Duchess Viviana was suggesting that Princess Elena should be encouraged to temporarily withdraw from public duties while the scandal was investigated, effectively removing her from the line of succession without the need for formal proceedings. The casual cruelty of destroying an innocent woman's life for political gain was more than Marcus could bear. He quietly excused himself from the conference room and made his way directly to Princess Elena's apartments, knowing that time was running out for any effective counteraction. He found Elena in her private study, surrounded by newspapers and legal documents. Her usual serene composure had been replaced by the intense focus of someone fighting for her life. She looked up as he entered, and Marcus was struck by the steel in her green eyes. "Captain Rothwell," she said, "I assume you've heard about our accelerated timeline." "Yes, Your Highness. The photographs were published this morning, 3 hours ahead of the schedule I overheard last night." Elena nodded grimly. "Which means someone wanted to catch me off guard, to prevent any possible preparation or response. Have you learned anything useful from your investigation?" Marcus quickly briefed her on his discoveries about Jeremy Hartwell, the suspicious security protocols, and the coordination between Duchess Viviana and Lord Chancellor Blackwood. Elena listened intently, making occasional notes. "Excellent work," she said when he finished. "I've made some progress as well. I contacted Lord Ashford directly through secure diplomatic channels. He's agreed to provide a statement confirming the legitimate nature of our meeting. But you're right that it won't be enough without supporting evidence." Elena stood and moved to a wall safe hidden behind a portrait of her late father-in-law. From it, she withdrew a small digital recording device. "Captain, I have a confession to make. I've been conducting my own investigation into palace irregularities for several months. Corruption, leaked information, suspicious financial transactions. I suspected someone was using their position for personal gain, but I never imagined the scope of what we're facing." Marcus stared at the recording device, realizing its implications. "You've been gathering evidence of corruption within the royal household." "Yes, and I believe some of that evidence may help us prove that this scandal is part of a larger conspiracy. But, Captain, using this information will require us to expose corruption at the highest levels of the monarchy. Are you prepared for the consequences?" Marcus thought of his 23 years of loyal service, his pension, his reputation, and his career. Then he thought of the innocent woman being destroyed by lies, and the damage being done to the monarchy he had sworn to protect. "Your Highness," he said firmly, "I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to serve justice." Elena smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Then, Captain Rothwell, I believe it's time we went on the offensive." Princess Elena activated the digital recording device with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear but from barely contained anger. The small screen illuminated to reveal a menu of audio files dated over the past 3 months, each representing hours of secretly recorded conversations that painted a picture of systematic corruption within the royal household. "I began recording these conversations after noticing irregularities in palace expenditures and diplomatic correspondence," Elena explained to Captain Marcus Rothwell. "What started as concerns about financial mismanagement led me to discover something much more sinister." Marcus leaned forward as Elena selected a file dated 6 weeks earlier. The audio quality was crystal clear, capturing a conversation between Lord Chancellor Blackwood and an unidentified man with a distinctly foreign accent. "The payment will be transferred to the Swiss account as agreed," the foreign voice said. "But we need assurance that the information about the Valdres grain negotiations will be accurate and timely." Blackwood's voice responded with chilling calmness. "Princess Elena has been handling the preliminary discussions personally. She trusts me completely with sensitive diplomatic matters. Obtaining the information will present no difficulties." Marcus felt his jaw clench as the implications became clear. He's been selling state secrets to foreign interests. "It gets worse," Elena said, selecting another file. This recording captured Duchess Viviana speaking with the same foreign contact. "My husband's position in the succession makes our partnership mutually beneficial," Viviana's voice purred through the speaker. "Once Elena is removed from consideration, Alexander and I will have significantly more influence over policy decisions. Your government's interests in Astoria will be well served." The pieces of the conspiracy finally assembled into a complete picture that left Marcus speechless. This was not merely about personal ambition or palace intrigue. Foreign agents had infiltrated the highest levels of the royal household, using Duchess Viviana's greed and Lord Chancellor Blackwood's corruption to destabilize the monarchy from within. "Your Highness," Marcus said slowly, "this is treason, high treason against the crown and the kingdom." Elena nodded gravely. "The foreign voice belongs to Viktor Kozlov, a trade representative from the Eastern Federation. But intelligence reports suggest he's actually an operative for their foreign ministry, specifically tasked with economic espionage and political manipulation in Western kingdoms." Marcus's military training kicked in as he processed the national security implications. If they're selling information about grain negotiations, they could be manipulating commodity prices across multiple kingdoms. The economic damage could be catastrophic. Exactly. And the scandal they've created around my supposed infidelity serves multiple purposes. It removes me as an obstacle to their plans, elevates their puppet Viviana to a position of greater influence, and distracts from any investigation into their real activities. Elena pulled out a detailed chart she had been working on, showing the connections between various palace irregularities and the timing of her recorded conversations. The pattern was undeniable. Sensitive information had been systematically leaked to foreign interests, always following private briefings that either Blackwood or Viviana had attended. The question now, Elena continued, is how we use this evidence without triggering a constitutional crisis that could destroy the monarchy entirely. Marcus studied the chart, his security experience helping him identify potential weak points in their enemy's operations. Your Highness, what about Jeremy Hartwell, the groundskeeper who took the photographs? If we can prove he was hired specifically for this operation, it demonstrates premeditation and conspiracy.
I've been thinking about that, Elena replied.
But approaching Hartwell directly could alert the conspirators that we're onto them. We need a more subtle approach. Their planning was interrupted by a soft knock on the study door. Margaret Thornfield entered with a concerned expression that immediately put both Elena and Marcus on high alert. Your Highness, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Lord Chancellor Blackwood is here. He says Queen Isabella has requested your immediate presence for urgent discussions about your situation. Elena and Marcus exchanged meaningful glances. Being summoned at this moment could not be coincidental. Tell Lord Chancellor Blackwood that I'll be along presently, Elena instructed. I need a few moments to review some documents. After Margaret withdrew, Elena quickly gathered her recording device and other evidence, securing them in the hidden wall safe. Captain, I need you to continue investigating while I handle this summons, but be extremely careful. They may be moving to isolate me further. What should I focus on during your absence? Elena considered their options quickly. Find Jeremy Hartwell. Don't approach him directly, but observe his movements and activities. If he's really a foreign operative, he may be preparing to leave the kingdom now that his mission is complete. Also, see if you can access Lord Chancellor Blackwood's private correspondence. If he's been communicating with Victor Kozlov, there might be electronic evidence. Marcus saluted formally. Understood, Your Highness. And if you need assistance during your meeting with the Queen, I'll have to handle that myself. But Captain, if something happens to me, if I'm arrested or confined, I need you to promise that you'll get this evidence to the proper authorities. Not palace authorities. Someone outside the royal household who can act independently. The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a mantle of honor and terror. You have my word, Your Highness. Elena straightened her appearance and checked her reflection in the antique mirror beside her desk. The woman looking back was no longer the charitable princess known for cutting ribbons and visiting hospitals. In her place stood someone prepared for battle, someone who understood that the next few hours would determine not only her personal fate, but the future of the kingdom itself. Captain, she said as she prepared to leave, whatever they accuse me of in that meeting, whatever evidence they claim to have, remember that we know the truth. Hold on to that. As Elena departed for what could be the most important confrontation of her life, Marcus began his own crucial mission. Moving through the palace with the practiced stealth that had made him invaluable to royal security, he made his way toward the groundskeeping facilities. The maintenance buildings occupied a cluster of structures behind the main palace, connected by covered walkways that allowed staff to move between areas regardless of weather. Marcus positioned himself in a service corridor with sight lines to both the groundskeeping office and the staff parking area. Within 20 minutes, his patience was rewarded. Jeremy Hartwell emerged from the main building carrying a large duffel bag and moving with the nervous energy of someone preparing for a hasty departure. Marcus observed him carefully, noting the man's surveillance awareness and professional efficiency. This was definitely not an ordinary groundskeeper. Hartwell loaded his bag into a modest sedan and began driving toward the palace's service exit. Marcus quickly radioed ahead to the security checkpoint, instructing them to note the vehicle's departure time and direction without interfering with its passage. Next, Marcus made his way to Lord Chancellor Blackwood's office suite, knowing that the man was currently occupied with Elena's summons to Queen Isabella. Blackwood's assistant, a nervous young man named Timothy, looked up with surprise as Marcus appeared. "Captain Rothwell, the Lord Chancellor is in meetings all afternoon. Was there something urgent?" Marcus adopted the authoritative tone that had served him well throughout his career. "Routine security review. I need to inspect the office communications equipment for any vulnerabilities." Timothy hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with allowing access to his superior's private office, but Marcus's senior position and official demeanor overrode his concerns. "I suppose that would be acceptable. Just please don't disturb any documents." Marcus entered Blackwood's private office, a richly appointed room that reflected the man's taste for luxury and status. Behind the imposing oak desk sat a computer terminal that Marcus knew would contain the correspondence he needed to examine. Using techniques learned during his security training, Marcus accessed Blackwood's email system and began searching for communications with foreign contacts. What he discovered exceeded even his worst expectations. The correspondence with Viktor Kozlov dated back over a year, detailing not only the recent conspiracy against Princess Elena, but a comprehensive plan to gradually undermine the monarchy's stability. The goal was not to destroy the royal family entirely, but to replace effective leaders with puppet figures who would serve foreign interests. One email in particular made Marcus's blood run cold. Phase 2 will commence once the Elena problem is resolved. Queen Isabella's advanced age makes her increasingly susceptible to influence. With Viviana positioned as the primary advisor for succession matters, we will have effective control over policy within 18 months. Marcus quickly photographed the most incriminating emails with a small camera he carried for security documentation, knowing that this evidence could prove crucial to exposing the full scope of the conspiracy. As he prepared to leave, he heard voices in the outer office that made him freeze. Lord Chancellor Blackwood had returned unexpectedly from the royal meeting, and his voice carried a tone of urgency that suggested events were accelerating beyond their original timeline. "Timothy, I need you to send an immediate message to our friends in the capital. The situation has become more complicated than anticipated, and we may need to implement contingency plans." Marcus realized he was trapped in the office with potentially explosive evidence, while the architect of the conspiracy stood just outside the door. Through a crack in the door, he could see Blackwood pacing frantically, his usual composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. The Lord Chancellor picked up his private telephone and dialed a number from memory. "Victor, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "Princess Elena is proving more resilient than expected. She's demanding a formal investigation into the photographs, and she's hinting that she has evidence of broader irregularities within the palace." Marcus held his breath as he listened to Blackwood's side of a conversation that was clearly outlining emergency measures to protect the conspiracy. "No, we cannot simply eliminate her. That would create too many questions and potentially trigger investigations we cannot control. But we need to neutralize her ability to present any evidence she might have gathered." The implications of neutralize in this context made Marcus's hand move instinctively to his service weapon. He was witnessing the planning of what could amount to an assault on the crown princess, and his duty was clear. Blackwood concluded his call and immediately began gathering documents from his safe, clearly preparing to destroy evidence. Marcus knew he had perhaps minutes to act before crucial proof of the conspiracy disappeared forever. Taking a deep breath, Marcus made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He burst through the office door, his weapon drawn, and his voice carrying the authority of 23 years protecting the crown. "Lord Chancellor Blackwood, by the authority of my oath to protect the royal family, you are under arrest for high treason against the kingdom of Astoria." The man who had manipulated the palace for over a year turned to face Marcus with an expression of shock that quickly transformed into calculated malice. "Captain Rothwell," Blackwood said quietly, "I think you've made a very serious mistake." The tension in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's office crackled like electricity as Captain Marcus Rothwell maintained his weapon drawn, his 23 years of training keeping his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was attempting. Blackwood stood behind his desk, his hands visible but poised near the document safe that Marcus knew contained evidence of the conspiracy. "Captain?" Blackwood said with the cold calm of a man accustomed to wielding power, You're pointing a weapon at the second highest ranking official in this kingdom. I suggest you consider the consequences of your actions very carefully. Marcus kept his voice level and professional. The consequences I'm considering, Lord Chancellor, are those of allowing treason to continue unchecked. Step away from the safe and place your hands where I can see them clearly. Instead of complying, Blackwood reached for the telephone on his desk. I'm calling Palace Security to report that you've suffered some kind of psychological breakdown. Your career, your pension, your reputation, all of it will be destroyed within the hour. The only thing being destroyed today, Marcus replied, is your conspiracy to betray the crown. I have evidence of your communications with Viktor Kozlov and your involvement in the plot against Princess Elena. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's features. He had underestimated the resourcefulness of a veteran royal guard, and that mistake was about to cost him everything. The office door burst open as Timothy, the assistant, returned with 2 palace security guards. The young man's eyes widened in horror as he saw Marcus holding his superior at gunpoint. Captain Rothwell, one of the guards said hesitantly, please lower your weapon. Whatever the problem is, we can resolve it through proper channels. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. The guards were following standard protocol, but they had no knowledge of the conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of their monarchy. He had seconds to decide whether to trust them with the truth. Sergeant Williams, Marcus addressed the senior guard. I'm exercising emergency authority under Security Protocol 7. Lord Chancellor Blackwood is suspected of high treason. I need you to secure this office and prevent the destruction of evidence. Protocol 7 was a rarely invoked procedure that allowed senior security personnel to take action during imminent threats to national security. Sergeant Williams hesitated, clearly struggling with the unprecedented situation. Blackwood seized the moment of uncertainty. Gentlemen, Captain Rothwell has clearly suffered a mental breakdown under the stress of recent events. He's making wild accusations about treason based on nothing more than paranoid delusions. The telephone on Blackwood's desk rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension. Blackwood moved to answer it, but Marcus gestured for him to stop. Step away from that phone, Lord Chancellor. But Blackwood ignored the command and lifted the receiver. Blackwood here. His expression immediately changed to one of alarm. What? How is that possible? Yes, I understand. We'll discuss this later. He replaced the phone and looked at Marcus with what might have been respect mixed with fury. It seems, Captain, that your Princess Elena has proven even more resourceful than either of us anticipated. Before Marcus could respond, the office door opened again, and Princess Elena herself entered, flanked by 2 guards Marcus didn't recognize. Her entrance transformed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Lord Chancellor, Elena said with icy composure, I believe you were expecting a different outcome from our meeting with Queen Isabella. Blackwood's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. Your Highness, this guard has clearly lost his mind. He's been making wild accusations and threatening violence. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Captain Rothwell has been acting under my direct orders, Lord Chancellor, as have the gentlemen accompanying me who represent Royal Intelligence Services rather than Palace Security. Marcus felt a surge of relief as he realized that Elena had not been walking into a trap, but had instead been springing one of her own. The guards with her were actually intelligence operatives, and the telephone call Blackwood had just received had clearly brought him news of his own exposure. The meeting with Queen Isabella was quite illuminating, Elena continued. When I played recordings of your conversations with Viktor Kozlov, Her Majesty's reaction was dramatic. She has ordered your immediate arrest and a full investigation into your activities. One of the intelligence operatives stepped forward. Lord Chancellor Blackwood, you are under arrest for high treason, conspiracy against the crown, and espionage. Captain Rothwell, you may lower your weapon. Marcus holstered his pistol with profound relief, watching as the operatives efficiently secured Blackwood and began cataloging the evidence in his office. The man who had orchestrated such an elaborate conspiracy was led away without the dignity he had spent a lifetime cultivating. As the immediate crisis concluded, Elena turned to Marcus with genuine gratitude. Captain, your courage in warning me about the conspiracy and your initiative in gathering evidence have saved not only my reputation, but potentially the security of our entire kingdom. Your Highness, Marcus replied. I was simply fulfilling my oath to protect the royal family. Though I must ask, how did you manage to turn the situation around so quickly? Elena's smile became more genuine. When I met with Queen Isabella, I didn't go alone or unprepared. I brought my recordings, the evidence you gathered about Jeremy Hartwell, and testimony from Lord Ashford confirming the legitimate nature of our diplomatic meeting. Most importantly, I brought intelligence officers who had been conducting their own parallel investigation into security leaks within the palace. Marcus realized that Elena had been far more prepared for this battle than he had imagined. You had advance warning about the conspiracy? Not specifically about the plot against me, but intelligence services had detected patterns of information leakage that suggested high-level infiltration. Your warning gave me the final pieces needed to expose the entire operation. Sergeant Williams, who had watched the entire confrontation with growing amazement, finally found his voice. Your Highness, what about Duchess Viviana? Was she arrested as well? Elena's expression hardened slightly. Duchess Viviana is being questioned separately. Her level of involvement will determine the charges she faces, but her marriage to Prince Alexander complicates the legal proceedings. The royal family must handle internal matters with extreme care to preserve the stability of the monarchy. As palace staff began the process of securing evidence and managing the crisis, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary events that had unfolded. A conspiracy that could have destroyed the monarchy had been exposed and defeated. But the cost in terms of public trust and royal relationships would be significant. Captain Rothwell, Elena said, drawing his attention back to the present. I want you to know that your actions today will not go unrecognized. You chose truth over convenience, justice over personal security. Those are the qualities this monarchy needs to survive and thrive. Over the following days, as the full scope of the conspiracy became public knowledge, Marcus watched the kingdom's reaction with fascination and concern. The revelation that foreign agents had infiltrated the royal household shocked the public, but Princess Elena's role in exposing the plot actually enhanced her popularity and credibility. The fabricated scandal that was meant to destroy her reputation instead became evidence of her integrity and courage. The newspapers that had published the misleading photographs issued public apologies and won praise for their cooperation with the investigation once the truth emerged. Jeremy Hartwell was apprehended at the border attempting to leave the country with a substantial sum of money and documents that proved his employment by foreign intelligence services. His confession provided crucial details about the scope of international efforts to destabilize Western monarchies. Lord Chancellor Blackwood faced trial for high treason, his decades of service to the crown overshadowed by his betrayal for personal gain. Viktor Kozlov was declared persona non grata and expelled from the kingdom, along with several other Eastern Federation trade representatives, who were revealed to be intelligence operatives. Duchess Viviana's fate proved more complex. While her involvement in the conspiracy was undeniable, her marriage to Prince Alexander created constitutional complications that required careful legal consideration. Ultimately, she agreed to renounce all claims to royal titles and duties in exchange for exile rather than imprisonment. 3 months after the crisis, Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. Princess Elena had recommended him for promotion to Chief of Royal Security, a position that would make him responsible for preventing future conspiracies against the crown. Captain, Elena said during their final meeting before his promotion ceremony, this crisis taught us that the greatest threats to the monarchy come not from external enemies, but from corruption within our own ranks. Your loyalty and courage proved that integrity still matters more than political convenience. Marcus accepted the promotion with a profound sense of responsibility. The conspiracy had been defeated, but the work of protecting the royal family from future threats would continue every day of his career. As he stood in the palace courtyard that evening, watching the sunset paint the ancient stones in shades of gold, Marcus reflected on the choices that had brought him to this moment. When faced with the decision between comfortable silence and dangerous truth, he had chosen truth. That choice had not only saved Princess Elena and exposed a treasonous conspiracy, but had also reaffirmed his faith in the values that made the monarchy worth protecting. The guard, who had spent over 2 decades keeping royal secrets, had learned that sometimes the most important secret to reveal is the one that protects those who cannot protect themselves. In the halls of Astoria Palace, where whispered conspiracies had once threatened to topple a kingdom, truth had proven more powerful than treachery. Princess Elena went on to become one of the most respected members of the royal family, her experience with the conspiracy making her an effective advocate for transparency and reform within the monarchy. The kingdom emerged from the crisis stronger and more secure, having learned that even ancient institutions must constantly guard against corruption and betrayal. And Captain Marcus Rothwell, now chief of royal security, continued his watch over the palace corridors, knowing that vigilance and integrity would always be the monarchy's greatest defenses against those who would abuse power for personal gain. The secret evidence from the guard had not only sealed the gates against conspiracy, but had opened the doors to a more honest and accountable future for the Kingdom of Astoria.